Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. How are you taking advantage of telling your brand story? Are you now taking the opportunity to make thoughtful change and tell that story over and over again to customers as well as to employees that gives them the freedom to start looking at their work differently? It's not just looking to make what is a copy of someone else's version of empathetic and safe. We have an amazing opportunity today to make real change. Carla Johnson is a global keynote speaker, best-selling author, and a marketing and innovation strategist. And on this episode, we'll discuss your brand story, innovation, the time to make change, outsource CMO roles, focusing more on customers, Nebraska, Spain, Denver, hammerhead migrations through the Galapagos Islands, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a world-renowned storyteller with a world-renowned shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Carla, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. For those who aren't one of the many people you follow on Twitter until that account got hacked, but for those that don't know you and your experience, give us a brief overview of your story and your career to date, please.
Well, thanks, Kenneth. I'm really excited to be here. I love talking about marketing, and I would say the common denominator from my background with all that I've done with marketing is that I've helped people rethink the work that they do and the impact that they can have. And I actually come to marketing in a roundabout way. I come from a family of engineers. I'm the youngest of 5 from a really small town of 1,000 people in northeast Nebraska.
Wow.
And following those older engineer left brain type siblings, I assumed that was my path as well. And I went to university to study electrical engineering. And that's when I found out quickly how really right-brained I am. I ended up with a master's in history. But because I knew the technical side, and I think the history studies brought out the storyteller in me, I went to work for architects to do marketing and business development for them. And the beauty of that for me as a marketer starting out that way in my career is that I feel that it was a time that showed me how the end result of everything that you do as a marketer shows up in a way that delivers an experience, because that's what architects do, is deliver that experience. So I learned how to reverse engineer it into marketing. And after architecture, my husband and I took a year and backpacked through South America. We moved to Denver, and I worked in the telecom industry for a few years before I left to start my own company. And that's essentially what I've helped people do is rethink their work and look at what's the story that you've been telling yourself, either about your brand to customers, about your brand to your employees, or about your own work to yourself that maybe could be something different that's more creative, innovative, inspiring, engaging, helpful than the story that you have been telling people in the past.
Yeah, that's great. So where did you live or where did you spend time in that year in South America?
We traveled around the continent. We started out in Ecuador to take Spanish lessons and traveled different places in the country there. We went to the Galapagos Islands. We went into the Amazon. We went up into Colombia. There were issues at the time, significant issues on the border of Colombia and Venezuela. So we didn't go into Venezuela, Guyana, French Guyana, Suriname, that area, but we covered the rest of the continent and had an opportunity to go to Easter Island as well before we came back. And it was just it was a phenomenal experience.
Well, you used that there were in past tense with issues on the in Venezuela. So it's sort of a perpetual sustainable problems there, but you're not a diver, are you?
I have scuba dived.
Did you go in the Galapagos Islands? Because it's fantastic.
We snorkeled through there.
Well, the hammerhead migration is divine. It's something you have to see at least once in your life. So it's been one of my favorites. But did you ever spend any time in Brazil?
We did, and in fact,
we spent
the Amazon. Yeah, we spent about 3 weeks in Rio de Janeiro, which I say you can still see my fingers scratching across the sidewalk to get on the bus to leave. I just loved it so much.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, eu amo Brazil. So, well, then where's the tie into Barcelona?
So then in 2001, when I quit my job and my husband had gotten laid off. It was the beginning of the dot-com bomb.
Sure.
We had already planned to go to Spain for a trip and went anyway and loved it. And have gone back several times, but the reason we went back last year to live for a year is because we always wanted to live abroad with our kids. And it was, I work for myself. My husband works for companies that don't have overseas operations. And so we said, well, this is our chance to just pick up and do it while our 3 kids are all home. Our oldest was a junior at that time. She's a senior now. And that's what we did. My husband took a year off and I worked from there, and the kids took classes online, and little did we know how much preparation that was going to be for the year that we're in right now. But it was our opportunity to rethink our work, rethink what school looks like, and really dive into and get to know other cultures firsthand by living there rather than traveling and staying here and there for a week or two.
So when you were in Spain, were you working with European clients?
I picked up both European offices of American clients and then European clients, that's where their base of operation were as well.
Sure. Well, I know customers all over the world have, obviously their brains have diversified, but did you find that the marketing was either far ahead or far below or about the same in Spain? Because I've found that differently. I think a lot of times you almost think of it like, oh, they're going to be lesser in marketing, but it's not so much with a lot of the Western European countries.
Yeah, it depended on the company. Some sure. I really learned a lot from, and even some of the professors that I met along the way, and others, you could really see that they were pretty novice in some of their marketing thinking and understanding. But once they were introduced to different concepts, particularly things around customer-centered marketing and moving away from the product and creating stories around the brand that help them gather this larger audience and community, it was common. I mean, then they're like, oh, how could I not see that? And they were just voracious and would head off into it. I mean, I know there's, just like we have here, there's always industries that say, that's great for them, but that won't work for us. And I think that there are more and more companies, especially now this calendar year, who are saying it doesn't matter if we don't think it'll work for us. It's something that we have to jump in and try. And there's a lot more willingness for people to try that. And it's very interesting because I would meet marketers who were excited about doing something different, interested, had done their homework, had things, but just like us, the struggle was, how do you get other people on board to support it when the business climate in, some countries more so than others are very much, this is the way we do it, and we're methodical, and we're happy to try something new and different as long as you can prove to us up front that it's going to work, and we won't have any fallout, and we won't fail or anything like that. So
yeah, I would love to open an office in Ibiza, which is absolutely beautiful. So put me down for that next trip.
I think we can be office mates. That would be great.
No kidding. Well, so when we look at what we're going through today in a COVID-19 world, which, have a coronavirus every year, and if you look at all the social unrest today, how do you think companies should pivot their marketing, especially their content, in that world that we're living in today and in the future? Because I think if anything, unlike a lot of different times in history, I mean, we go through something pretty significant every decade, but this one's a little more of a reset button that's a little harder of a reset, I think, for a lot of people, because like all kinds of industries, every industry rather, has been impacted by this. This is not something that just particularly hit banking and you can maybe isolate it this way. This hit everybody.
And I think that the one thing that marketers have before them as a huge opportunity that they don't realize is that when we're in, almost this word of crisis is overused, because this is a situation that has been indiscriminate as to who it affects, but there's always chaos of some sort. And when we have that, the one thing that people expect that marketers don't realize is change. They know that things cannot continue as they used to be. They don't know what the new will be. So marketers have this opportunity to create the narrative between what have we done in the past and why is it shedding, and what are the good things that we have that we want, that are strong, that we want to carry forward, and how do we use that as the foundation for where we go next. And it's a perspective that we can use not only for customers, audiences, externally for demand gen and content marketing and things like that, but also really importantly internally for employees. And it gives employees this freedom to start looking at their work with a different lens and a different way of saying, okay, well, clearly the door is closed. I can't just, throw a fit and stomp my feet and, shake my hands and cry and we'll go back to that. It's not going to. So now that we've all agreed on that, let's look at not necessarily a clean slate, but what would we like that slate to look like? Because it's going to be created. Now, here's our opportunity to create it thoughtfully and with strategy. Now, that doesn't mean that it won't iterate, it won't morph, and that's the important thing that we need to have happen, is to be able to have the strength and foundation of what was good in the past that we want to pull forward, but also the flexibility so we don't become so rigid so fast that we go back into snapping. And you look at the companies, there's a lot that aren't going to survive, but there is so much that we need to look out that we can do and have control over that will help determine if a company will survive. And I think marketers don't always identify those opportunities.
So then how do you go about identifying those opportunities? I think some of them are obvious. I think it's very interesting, and we're past the spring of 2020. When you look at that, it's very easy for a lot of people to think that their story was spot on point. And then when you go back and you look at it in a post-COVID-19, not that we'll ever totally get rid of this damn thing, but when you look past the spring, it's very easy to look back at a lot of things that we were doing in content marketing and storytelling and just say this was wrong. And you see that it stands out so much with a lot of the brand messaging and advertising that people are either doing in their email campaigns or as they're doing in their advertising, and they think it's down to their core, but like I told you earlier, it's kind of like they're saying we care ish. I mean, it's not like they're saying it that much. There was a little foreshadowing there as well, I guess you could say, that I haven't shared, but it really, I think some of these things have really stood out to me, and I'm wondering how you're talking to clients today about how much they need to pivot. Is it there's the fundamentals of who they are, and then there's really the fundamentals of their message that maybe they don't need to change the former, but now the latter, they're having to take a hard pivot left or right as opposed to wherever they are.
One of the things that I ask people who call me and say they need help with the message, with figuring out where we go next or what we do or where we prioritize, is that I ask them, how much are you looking around to see what everybody else is doing?
Yes.
And I find that has been a big root problem with all of this Samesville messaging.
Amen.
You and I have both gotten in our inbox, and they're trying to be their version of empathetic while also being incredibly safe. And that's why everybody sounds the same. And that's why every email, I mean, literally you could strip the content out and you couldn't tell what brand it's from. And I always tell people, think about a brand just like you do the people in your life. And there is nobody in your life who's going to be everything for all that you need if you're a well-rounded person. If you don't have a very big horizon, there probably is one person who can answer everything for you. But you have very distinct personalities and types of people in your life, just like you will have brands. And the thing that makes you trust the people in your life is that they sound the way they sound all the time. And they may tell you something you don't want to hear. They may respond to something that's going on in a crisis or chaos, but they will always have that very distinct vernacular. I mean, I'm from a small town, and I tell you, when I get mad or when I get under pressure or whatever it is, those words and how I describe and talk about things come out in a small town way. And if I were to talk to my followers to my email subscribers, or start writing very differently and fit into that box like everybody else is talking, they, they call bull on me, and they say, what did you just pick this up and change the names to, represent you? This isn't who you are. And I always tell brands, especially in this time, you have to show who you truly are and bring out that brand personality and that brand voice. Now, that doesn't mean if you're, or a flippant or a bullish kind of brand that you bring that forward. You still have to be compassionate and empathetic, but don't look around and see what everybody else is saying. How would you sit down face to face to somebody and talk to them about it, and use that as your filter for how you talk to the outside world? Because that's what connects people's hearts to a brand and gets them to trust them, is when you talk like a real person, not like the board of directors and the entire legal team had to all come together and agree on what went out in an email.
Yeah, and then it's 2 or 3 weeks late. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
and then so if you're authentic Nebraska, Northwest Nebraska twang, whatever that sounds like, I don't know what Northwest
Yeah.
Nebraska twang would
Well,
sound like.
I'll tell you, for Pete's sake, drops into my
Okay,
vocabulary.
nice. So, how are you advising clients then today to rethink their marketing? I know part of that's through an upcoming book where you're focused on innovation, but obviously you talk a lot about innovative marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I talk to them about is, we're going to be in a hybrid model for a while. We've talked
Hmm.
about, for the last 20 years, we've talked about the need for digital transformation. Well, leave it to 2020 to make it clear this is your focus. It's, if you haven't gone through digital transformation by now, if you've never stepped your foot into that pond, and 2020 either made sure you did, or made sure, your business probably isn't around anymore, is that we have to look at, how do we now start to blend the hybrid of this virtual, along with, people still crave a face-to-face interaction. Things might be feel more convenient, work from home, more efficient, more all of these things, but humans are social animals, and there's just a completely different dynamic of sitting in a room with somebody versus sitting in a Zoom room with somebody. And there's a different level of trust, and there's all of these little nonverbal, neuroscience, psychological things that go on when you can actually, see somebody in real life that can't be replicated. And it's also how, if you're spending millions of dollars with somebody, I mean, I work primarily in B2B, there's a lot that still needs to be done where you have interaction with people. So it's that blend of, I still want to get together, and I still want to know the people, I'm putting my career on the line to buy from. And also this efficiency, and it is nice to not have to spend an hour commuting each way to an office and sitting around with people and getting called into last minute meetings that aren't efficient. So that's why it's going to be hybrid, because we have to think of new ways to do everything. There's a lot of people who are going to work from home. I mean, we see what Twitter has done. And so when we think about rethinking our work and looking at how to be more creative and innovative in what we're doing, what we're missing is this ability to teach people and teams a new process of thinking that helps the overall organization become stronger, more effective. So it's this intersection between humans and technology. And ever since we've talked about digital transformation, business transformation, all of these things, there's been three legs that stool has expected to stand on. It's the people, processes, and technology. Well, we have more technology than we ever will be able to fully use 100%, and choices, and
Sure.
that's good, painful Scott Brinker chart that we
Yeah.
see every year. Marketers, we have more processes than anybody wants to deal with, and we've gotten to the point where there are so many processes that it kills people's ability to critical think. And I see that in marketers a lot. They say, well, this is what the data says. And I said, well, what do you think? Like, what do you think about the data? And you take the data away, and it's a crutch, and they don't know what to think. And that shows that this last part is the people, and we've really grossly neglected the people part of this. And we can't just depend on the technology to connect us. We really have to look at this people part, and looking at how we do connect the people with the technology. I mean, for me, the people always has to stand above the technology. And I think for most companies, it's been technology first, processes underneath that, and then, oh yeah, there's these things that are warm bodied that run around and do things. I guess that's the people part.
Yeah.
There's nothing that addresses that. And there needs to be, I tell my clients, there needs to be a much stronger focus on that, because it's with budget cuts that every company is going to face. It's not about the people having to do more with less. It's about them learning to do more with what they already have. And you need people who can think and think differently about this, and rethink their work, because I know there's a lot of work that doesn't need to be done. And so quit wasting your time and frustration and energy on things that were for a world that doesn't exist anymore. And let's rethink about, what do we want that world to be, and create it for our customers and our employees, and now bring out the best in people that they have naturally and make it happen.
Well, I, for one, am a big fan of Scott Brinker's the Martech 500,000, which is quickly what it's getting to. It's so many pieces of technology, and we've done so much to create technology to connect that so many teams have forgotten to actually do the human side of that. So one of the things, though, that you brought up, and I was thinking about this, we speak so often, this is more of like a B2B type question as well. We think so often about how we help educate individual marketers, but really what all of us are trying to do, you, me, and in the roles that we live in today, it's to help push those teams to do something. So it becomes even more of a challenge to move a slower, bigger ship, as opposed to just one individual, to find some symbiosis. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about how you tackle working on occasion as an outsourced CMO. I've found that, having done this myself, I've worked with a lot of friends who've done this as well. It's a service that you do and offer on occasion, I'm sure, as well. When you come in and do that, do you find that to be the most fruitful way, if you will, to reinvent the entire process, if they will? Or is there another way that you can come in as a consultant to get that larger team to think a certain way without necessarily having to be in charge of the entire thing?
Well, the first question I ask when I come in to work with the team is, what's the bigger business objective that you're wanting to accomplish? Are you, and it's beyond the money. Of course, every company wants more sales. They want shorter sales times. They want more leads, and they want all that. But what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is it that you're wanting to deliver to your customers? And I still, it's actually nauseating for me the number of times that I talk to an executive team, and I can tell whether or not that will continue to work forward. Either they decide or I decide. I mean, I can see it. The writing on the wall is, if they are only talking about the products and how, if we could just get this product in, if we could just get sales and product and this and that, they are so micro focused and so myopic in what their purpose is as a business, that they and I will never get along. Because I always say, like, why are you here? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And I remember being in a strategy session with a executive team from a software company, and they kept saying, I want to know specifically what, it was the CFO, I want to know specifically what tactics are you going to do to make this happen? Because I think we should go out and we should start cold calling. We should do like door hangers on B2B companies, like leave this on their door of their office when they go in every day. And I said, like, what is it you're trying to accomplish here? Are you wanting to hang door hangers, or are you wanting to change the lives of these students that will ultimately be affected? It was a software platform for teachers and administrators. And he stopped, and there's this long, awkward, uncomfortable pause until they said, well, we want to help the students. And I said, well, do you honestly think hanging door hangers is going to get you there? Well, probably not. Well, then let's really look at what's a strategy. Like, how do you start to build that community? How do you start to think about the work that you do in terms of what they need? And luckily for that client, it was a pivot point. But there's plenty who say, well, you know, essentially they don't know what they need. Well, it's not that they don't know what they need or want, it's that a brand doesn't want to make the changes to do that. They want to keep operating in that, pre-COVID, pre-2009, pre-9/11, name any chaotic event that's come, like you said, every 10 years. And they just don't want to make that change. And that's always what we have to look at. I mean, it's always about the customer. And if you can't put them at the
Amen.
heart of, yeah, if you can't put them at the heart of every decision you make, then you're making the wrong decisions. And some companies are so um, flustered and have no idea what to do right now. Well, then you don't know your customers, or you're not listening to them.
Do you find that either training a team in a group event or coming in as a consultant, as a direct consultant, working on a specific project, or working as an outsourced CMO? I mean, what are the ways that you find to be the most fruitful to the business itself, especially in the B2B space, as to how do they change that type of thinking?
Well, the thing that I always love to use, and the big reason is because it's not something you use on somebody. It's an approach that you use with somebody that helps them uncover the root reason they're wanting to do
Agreed.
something. And when you do that, then they will say, "Oh my gosh, okay, that's not what I want to have happen here." But if you especially as a marketer, if you try and tell a salesperson that, or a product person that, you're they might as well just, to hang you up. Or that's why marketing has such a marketing problem, is because we're trying to tell people what they need rather than helping them discover it for themselves, and then that gives us credibility. Is that I happen to just go through, it's called the process of the 5 whys, and it was started during the Six Sigma and lean programs at
Sure.
Toyota. And looking at, okay, what's really the root of what you want here. And so, I mean, just a simple example of a salesperson coming to a marketing person and saying, I need this brochure, or this email campaign to go out. And just marketers taking the time to simply say, okay, fabulous, let me help me understand what it is you're trying to accomplish, so I can support you better, we can work together better. And just saying, okay, now why is this email campaign important? Okay, then the salesperson has to actually say something beyond, because I think it will give me leads. You have to start digging into the whys behind this. And that's the reason people don't understand why they're creating content. So they're creating it with no intention in mind. So it's a bunch of crap. And they're doing it because either they don't want to tell somebody no, or the person who's requesting it. And this isn't unusual. They're just saying, because I said so, without, again, putting the customer at the heart of everything that you do. So if you can say, okay, they say, well, because we need to tell the customer about this situation that's going on. Okay, great. Why does that matter to the customer? In general, the process, the process, but it takes between 3 or 7 times of asking why, and you get down to the root cause. And a lot of times then, especially with salespeople, they go, oh, I do see that's a waste of their time, because during this process, they start to put themselves in the shoes of their customer, and they think about, okay, when I go talk to that customer the next time, are they going to ream me for sending out a bunch of crap that came, and now I see that I'm the one who requested it. Now I see how it comes full circle. Okay, if I'm going to have that conversation with that customer, what do I want them to say to me about, man, I am so glad I got that fill in the blank, because it was so helpful, because, like, what did it deliver that they really needed? And that's ultimately the conversation that marketers have to have over and over and over again. And I talked to every executive outside of marketing, and I said, we need to start to think about this. Now, if you're not thinking about this as an executive in whatever area that you do, then you don't understand the role of marketing, because we're the ones who help
Amen.
bring what customers are saying in to the organization earlier, so that by the time the conversation does get to a sales team, that that prospect or even current customer knows so much more, and the salesperson and then have a conversation in a way that's more productive because they're talking about things that really matter to the salesperson that only they can explain or talk about or do. But if you talk to a salesperson and you say, what are the conversations that you have over and over and over again at the beginning of a sales relationship that you wish you could just automate or do away with? These are the things you need to push up to marketing, because then you start to have the unique conversations from a sales point of view that can't be answered up front because they're more specific to a situation, which means that customer prospect is more engaged already, has already been self-educated in a way that's helpful to that salesperson. Because I mean, marketers are guilty of this too. Customers are going to be self-educated, but that doesn't mean that they're well educated. So we have to be thoughtful and go back and say, okay, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here? And we have to keep that top of mind all the way through the process. And that changes the thinking for everybody. And that's how you start to break down some of the silos and say, well, okay, I guess I can't do this all by myself. Even though, as marketers, there's a lot of salespeople we know who think, can do this all by themselves. But the truth is you can't. And you can't do it as a brand, just, one department. It's not just marketing. It's not just sales. It's not just, IT and running a website or, internal everything, the user experience. It's not one group. It has to be an across the board objective and intention for everything that we do.
Agreed on many levels. And I was listening to this. It reminded me of sort of my question. I think is a little bit loaded, because when you go in as an outsourced CMO, you can blow things up, if you will, and put together the pieces that you need to be. It gives you a little more freedom to do that. And as a consultant, you can maybe point out some things with a little more freedom once you focus on whatever problem is you're able to solve, and you can uncover some other stuff. But really, a lot of those training programs, like you're talking about, it really can be a great question, kind of a play on question answer, but where you're uncovering so many different questions where you find that teams are not aligned. And sort of a funsy I've done with a lot of teams that were sales and marketing, pull them together and you ask them some of those why questions. And it's just so interesting that people that have been working with each other for, say, 5 to 10 years can come up with completely different answers. And it's one of those aha moments for a lot of the top leadership to go, oh, okay, now I get why we're not as aligned as I thought we were on what it was at our core DNA. And then you start to understand why it looks like a big hot mess to a customer. And
that is so true. And hot mess, that's one of my probably overused words right now. And you hit on it. And you and I talked about this a little bit, just the two of us, before we started recording, is like, what's the story that you're telling? And in looking at all of this, I mean, you think about if you put 10 people into a room for a book club, you start out with certain ways. One, you say, here's the book we're reading. Let's remind everybody, because everybody in that room, maybe some of them read the book, maybe some didn't, maybe some just showed up for the wine and to see, yes. I hear some wine flows during some book clubs. And, let's remind everybody of what story that we're in. And that's a big part of saying, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here? Like, let's get everybody into the actual same book that we're reading. Now, even if everybody's read the same book, they're probably all at different parts in it. And you see this a lot with executives who say, we have been working on this initiative for how many years? And exactly. These freaking employees still cannot get it through their heads. Okay, one, this is something that occupies a tremendous number of hours every day for so many weeks, months, years for the executives. For a lot of the next level in an organization, particularly if you work for a big enterprise and out to the general population, it's still new to them, and it might be a half hour on their calendar once every other month. And so by the time it gets down to them, the executives have worked on it. It's like looking at something pass from the head of a comet to the very tail. You're always going to have stragglers. So the more that you can remind people of what story are you in, where are you in that story, what's happened in the past, and where are we moving, what's moving us forward, like what's our plot and where are we going forward toward, the better cohesion and fewer silos that you'll have. Because everybody understands that, in a book and in a narrative, you have lots of different characters and plots, but they all work together. And if they don't, then your story doesn't work, and neither does the experience of your brand. And that's where you see all of this copycat, Samesville, boring, completely lacking empathy in communications that's been coming out the last couple of months.
Well, they take their focus off the customer. And if I've told this story once, I've told it, I know, a dozen times on the 200 plus shows I've had to date, is that, for your example, book club, you pull somebody together at the first of that line of 10 people and tell them, the person in front of them, the story of whatever was in that book. By the time you get to the end of the line, it's rubber baby buggy bumper.
Yes.
And then and I find it, interesting so often that at the very top, the C-suite, they're primarily thinking about what our sales, they're looking at an NPS score and they're saying that, it's a 4.9 on a 5-point scale, just for, so to speak. But the buyer at home, I don't care what product or service it is. I'll pick on an airline, for example. I don't care if I call in about something going on with my air travel. I don't care if you're on the user design team on the website, a customer service person I spoke with, a baggage handler, or the pilot. Not the best example. This could apply to any B2B or B2C brand in the country, though. I'm not really thinking about what your job responsibilities are, and I'm trying to fix my problem as a customer, which is so different than the way every other siloed team thinks about it. And it's breaking down those damn silos, because I've said this for the last several decades, the confused buyer always says no. And now in an age and era where they have choices, if you don't get that message throughout, and culture is important and sales are important, but if you want to lose sales and customers quickly, have your message and your storytelling down wrong throughout the company. If they're telling different stories, they're going to miss it. So
that is so true. And you think about the number of times, I just had to go through an hour long, I think I was on hold for 47 minutes during a 60-minute call last week with Verizon about something with my account, and because I'm a business customer for them. And the number of times I got passed around, and people say, well, that's not my area. Let me pass you to the right person. And that person goes, well, I'm not the right person. Let me pass you to the right person. And every time I have to repeat my information again. And I'm thinking, I'm your customer. You have all of this in a database someplace. Why can't, when I put my number in when I first call to say this is the number I'm calling about, why doesn't it automatically populate on their screens? Even if they have to transfer me, they should have everything there.
100%.
I know people, Walgreens does this. Why can't Verizon?
Yeah.
It's
happened to me last week with AT&T, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I look at a company like Apple. Like, I switched from PC to Mac a couple of years ago, and I have to say it's one of the most unreachable brands I have ever worked with. And everything is fine until it isn't. And then it's a nightmare. And, nobody gets yelled at because you can't get a hold of anybody unless you get in your car and you drive to a Apple store.
Well, then the technology, I can give you 1,000 examples. I've got recorded examples to where somebody sees one ad, the sales team is selling one thing, they see an advertisement somewhere, they call into the call center to buy the product or service or whatever it is, if it requires that, if it's not just an e-commerce play, or they get an ad that drives them to an e-commerce page and it's not aligned. It's a different offer. It's $99.95 versus 50% off. Good luck for a lot of people to try to decompress what that math means. It's just, there's so much misalignment today in storytelling that it's really a massive problem for customers. So
well, and I tell marketers, I tell salespeople this too. I tell everybody in businesses, I say your marketing, especially your marketing, but also your sales team, they're your storytellers. They're the ones, creating that external narrative. Now it's everybody else's responsibility in your company to prove that it's true based on the experience they deliver. So your example right there is a perfect example. And I've had salespeople even say, I went to visit my customer and they had this white paper on their desk and they go, I want to know more about this. At the end of the white paper, it says, talk to your local representative. And the salespeople goes, huh? I don't know anything about this. I'm clueless. So they've just proven that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing.
Agreed. Well, Carla, I asked this question of all my guests. What is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Oh, I think I would have to say the great white. And this is why. When I was a little girl, we would watch Jacques Cousteau.
Sure.
And I remember him going out, and I remember him going down in those cages. And, childhood memories, it's been a few years since I was that age. I remember watching those shows where the person was in the cage and the great white shark would come and they're pounding the cage and you could see the rows of teeth, and it was just that tension, and I guess it's probably the adrenaline rush that comes with it. I'd have to say, just and then Jaws, of course.
Yeah, well, I love it, and I love screwing with everybody in the cage with me if they go, just to scare them just a little bit. So if you take a nervous person and put them in a cage, just give them a little poke on their rib cage or something, and it'll really freak them out.
I would be a dead person in your cage. I'll just tell you that now.
Well, Carla, it's that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I am, and I feel like I should have a red button to hit before I answer, so maybe I can just make my own sound effect or something.
It will be very easy, I promise. All right, number 1, Spain or Brazil?
Ooh, I'm going to have to go with Spain, which is, I think until I lived there would have been a much harder decision to make because I really love both countries.
Yeah, slightly better living conditions. Brazil, Rio, especially the Northeast, much prettier, beautiful beaches, just as pretty as Ibiza, but either are pretty fantastic.
Although the black beans and rice in Brazil,
the food is far better. Oh my God, no! The food, feijoada. I love feijoada and a churrascaria any day. So number 2, content marketing or storytelling?
Oh, see, I find those greatly overlapping.
Well, they're siblings or maybe cousins, but you still got to pick your favorite cousin.
I'm going to have to go with storytelling.
Okay. Number 3, Northwest Nebraska or Colorado?
Oh, and it was actually Northeast Nebraska by South Dakota
Nebraska.
and Iowa. And I'm going to have to say Colorado. And I can say this real clear because we just drove back from my mother and father-in-law and both sides of our family live just outside of Omaha. And we went back there for the last week when it was, the heat and humidity. And it was really great to wake up in Denver this morning and high elevation and low humidity and cool temperatures at night. So definitely Colorado.
Yeah, agreed. Number 4, beer or wine?
Oh, wine, because I'm gluten intolerant.
Oh, interesting. Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread? And being gluten intolerant, this is going to be a little bit tougher, but if you remember your old non-gluten intolerant days, what would you have said?
I'm going to have to say if I could have those fluffy buttermilk biscuits, I'd go biscuits because I do love a good biscuit and gravy for breakfast.
Good. So, Carla, where can people find out more about you, keep up with what you're doing in speaking, outsource CMO, blogging, and everything else?
The best place is on my website. It's carlajohnson.co. There's no M, just .co. And when you go there, there's an opportunity to subscribe to my weekly newsletter. And that goes out just to my subscribers. I don't put it on a website for people to read another time. And I do give special giveaways and tools and things in there that I don't give away in other ways or places. And then my blog is on there as well. I love to have people connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know where they heard me, like on this podcast. And also, shout out on Twitter when that works. That's great. And I'm pretty active on Instagram as well. And that's just carlajohnson.co on Instagram.
Perfect. Carla, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you, Kenneth. It was really a great time. I appreciate it.
So that was my conversation with Carla Johnson, a global keynote speaker, best-selling author, and a marketing and innovation strategist. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, I loved it when we discussed the opportunity that marketers have before them that they may not realize is there with the door open to change. Carla said, and I quote, "Marketers have this opportunity to create the narrative between what have we done in the past and why is it shedding, and what are the good things that we have that we want, that are strong, that we want to carry forward, and how do we use that as a foundation to where we go next." And it's a perspective that we can use not only for customers, audiences, externally for demand gen and content marketing and things like that, but also really importantly internally for employees. And it gives employees this freedom to start looking at their work with a different lens. Great comments. Marketers don't always identify those opportunities, so here's your chance to make some thoughtful change. Second, so many people and brands do this. We want them to be authentic, but brands instead mimic with their version of empathetic and safe. It doesn't sound authentic or feel genuinely empathetic at all. You take the logo off and you can't tell the difference from any other vanilla brand. You're different. Your brand is different. You should be marketing why you're different. We're not looking for something that looks like everything else. We don't want to hear from a committee of communications and legal only. So talk like a real person, and maybe more people will actually listen to what your brand has to say. Third, put the customer at the heart of your decision making and remind people internally and externally. Remind them of your story over and over again. As Carla said, all the characters and plots have to work together to create the story of your brand. Just make sure that they understand that story so very well. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Here's a story I'm going to tell you over and over and over again. And that's the story you'll hear here on this and every episode of A Shark's Perspective.